So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and meet the 5 secret managers working deep inside massive computer networks. You could say they're pretty much the only thing standing between a perfectly organized system and total, absolute digital chaos.
I mean, really, just stop and think about that for a second. You've got thousands of users, all trying to log in, change their passwords, access files, all at the same time. How in the world does that stay organized? What stops 2 new employees from getting the same ID number, or 2 different departments from accidentally claiming the same name?
Because if you don't have a system, that's exactly what you get. Anarchy. It would be a complete nightmare. And in the digital world, this is a very, very real problem. But thankfully, Microsoft's Active Directory has this brilliant, really elegant solution to stop it.
And the solution? Well, it's actually surprisingly simple. You just establish a crystal clear chain of command. Just like in any well-run company, you assign very specific, very important jobs to key individuals. That way, nobody ends up stepping on each other's toes. Okay, so here's the official kind of technical term for our solution: FSMO roles. Yep, it sounds a little complicated, but the idea behind it is super simple. You have these specialized servers called domain controllers. Think of them as the IT managers for your network. And instead of letting every single one of those managers make critical changes whenever they want, you designate one single master for each of 5 crucial jobs. That single master approach, that's the whole key.
So let's actually meet these managers. And we're not going to think of them as just some abstract technical roles. No, let's think of them as having specific job titles inside our digital company.
And yep, there are exactly 5 of them. No more, no less. Just 5 single points of authority that work together to keep the entire network running smoothly.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because here's how those 5 managers are organized. Think of a giant corporation. You've got 2 HQ team roles that oversee the entire company. We call that the forest. Then for every single department in the company, we call those domains, you have a dedicated local team of 3 managers. So let's start by meeting that local team, the ones on the ground. So these are the 3 roles that you'll find in every single domain on your network, and they're the ones handling the really critical day-to-day operations. First up is definitely the busiest member of the local team, the PDC Emulator. You can think of this one as the ultimate authority, the final boss, on 2 things that are absolutely critical for any network: passwords and time. So if you try to log in with the wrong password, it's the PDC Emulator that has the final say. When you change your password, it's the very first to know, which makes sure that change spreads across the network super fast. It's also the network's official timekeeper, which is hugely important for security. The bottom line, this role is a serious workhorse. Next up on the local team, we've got the RID Master. The best way to think about this manager is as the person in charge of the company's ID card printer. Its one and only job is to make sure every single person and every single computer gets a totally unique ID number. But here's the really clever part. It doesn't hand out these IDs one by one. I mean, that would be way too slow. Instead, it gives each of those IT managers, the domain controllers, a big block of unique numbers, or RIDs. Then, when a new user account gets created, the local manager just grabs the next number from its own private stash. It's an incredibly efficient system that guarantees no 2 things ever get the same security ID. And the final member of our local team is the Infrastructure Master. This manager, well, it's kind of like the person in HR who makes sure everyone's records are kept up to date, especially when people move between different departments. Its whole job is to track the relationships between users and groups that are in different domains. So for example, if a user from the sales domain is in a group that belongs to the marketing domain, and that user's name changes, the Infrastructure Master is the one that makes sure the group in marketing gets updated correctly. It basically keeps the whole company org chart consistent. All right, so we've met the local team. Now let's move on up to corporate headquarters and meet the 2 big leadership roles that have authority over the entire forest. First up at HQ is the Schema Master. You can think of this one as the chief architect for the entire company. It holds the one and only master blueprint for what the entire Active Directory structure can even look like. So if you want to make a really fundamental change, like say adding a new piece of information like an employee ID number to every single user account, you can't just do it. You have to go through the Schema Master. It is the single gatekeeper for any changes to the directory's basic rules and structure, and that's what guarantees consistency across the entire organization. And finally, we've reached the top, the Domain Naming Master.
This role is effectively the CEO of corporate structure. It has the final say on adding new departments or even renaming the ones you already have. So if you want to add a new europe.company.com domain to your forest, you have to get approval from the domain naming master. It is the only one that can make that kind of change, and its main job is to make sure you don't accidentally create two departments with the same name. It literally manages the shape of your entire digital empire. So now we know who our 5 managers are. But, knowing what they do is really only half the battle. The other half is knowing where to put them so you get the absolute best performance. And this quote right here from Microsoft's own documentation, it says it all. The password boss, our PDC emulator, is by far the busiest. I mean, it's constantly getting pinged for password checks and time syncs. So the lesson is simple. You want to put this role on a really powerful, really reliable server that can handle all that heavy lifting.
Okay, now for a classic gotcha that can trip up even experienced pros. There's a special kind of server called a global catalog. Think of it like a phone book for the whole company. It has a partial record of every single user and group. So it seems logical to put our HR organizer, the infrastructure master, on that server, right? But here's the thing. Doing that can actually break it. And here's the simple reason why. The infrastructure master's job is to fix records for users from other departments that it doesn't know about. But if you put it on the global catalog, the company phone book, it sees a partial entry for everyone and it mistakenly thinks, oh, I already have all the information I need. So it just stops doing its job. Now, there are a couple of specific exceptions to this rule, but for the most part, it's a critical detail you have to get right. So as we wrap this all up, what's the big picture here? What's the main takeaway from meeting these 5 digital managers?
It's this. They are the absolute guardians of digital order. Without these clearly defined single master roles, any large network would just descend into a conflicting, inconsistent mess. They are the quiet, essential, and totally unsung heroes that make everything else work the way it's supposed to. And that, of course, brings us to our final thought. We've seen how these 5 roles prevent chaos when they're working, but they are, by design, single points of authority. So, what happens to your network if the server hosting one of these critical managers suddenly goes offline? Well, that's a whole other can of worms and a question for another day.